Good evening, students. Yeah, so we're talking about the history of English literature, and in history of English literature, so far we had discussed in our last lecture. mm, I'm not going so far kind of discussion, but in our last lecture we had seen that how Elizabethan age has shaped its political, social, and economical as well as literary background. Um, as we have seen that. The role of the dynastic struggle over there, and the roles of the dynasties was one of the important stuff to discuss. And we find that how the Tudor dynasty and the Stuart dynasty, the second thing, uh, they both had uh, get birth to this War of Roses, where the House of York and House of Lancasters fought for 30 years. And then we had seen that how the hierarchy of the Tudors reigned till 1603, and how the Queen Elizabeth I was considered as the last Tudor queen. So this was the thing. Then we had seen that how the Bible and the translation studies, uh, not studies, but the translations of the Bible come into the picture, and how they had played an important role. Again, we had seen a kind of overview from John Wycliffe to Martin Luther, uh, or let's say William Tyndale, the one these people had, we can call it, that is, had done the scientific study of the Bible, and they come up with the translations of the Bible, which had helped a lot in the shaping of the world. Okay, uh, shaping of the world in the sense where we can see that how these two things have these two things. First one, the translation of the Bible, and the religious reformations, which we can call Protestant Reformation, which gets separated from the Roman Catholic Church, and it had played a very vital role in the development of the thought process of English people and the English society. So on and so forth. As you just move forward and see, uh, in the reign of Queen Elizabeth, we had these different kind of changes has took place. Uh, Before moving towards the art today's main, that is core subject, like we're going to talk about the Elizabethan poetry, which we already had started. We had talked about the Edmund Spenser. There is a question in June 2013 net, which was asked by the UGC, used while UGC, now it's NTA who conduct the exam, we know. And the question was, who is called an ideal Renaissance man? An ideal Renaissance man. So we are going to discuss about this, an ideal Renaissance man, in today's lecture. Along with, we will talk about the uh, total miscellany and the contributors. Then we'll talk about the different type of sonnets. So this would be the timeline of today's lecture. After this, we'll talk about some minor writers if we have some, or we'll move towards the drama. Okay. So most of us, we have an idol who is called as an ideal Renaissance man, but he is nothing, or he is no one other than Sir Philip Sidney. Okay. So mm, when you talk about uh, specifically the development of the poetry of Elizabethan age, most of the poetry is considered as the core poetry. Okay, means it's revolving around the poet queen and these people. I have one derogatory word for it, but no, I don't think so that that should be used over here. So this kind of uh, bootlicking activity we can call it as in sophisticated English specifically, and these people had done the same thing. That is my point of view. This is my point of view. Let me clear it first. Some of them, is Edmund Spencer and several other writers. Sir Philip Sidney was the one who just go against the Queen at the time. Uh, Another person who went against the Queen and he has suffered a lot. That is Christopher Marlowe. We'll come to him later. So Edmund Spencer, we talked about him in our last lecture, where he's called as a poet's poet by Charles Lamb. I already have told you about this thing. Then he's famous for his Shepherd calendar. Then the thing which we already talked about, the Fairy Queen. Okay, I'll just give you the overview. In the Fairy Queen, we can find he just talked about the Aristotelian ideals of virtue, and he was base for this King Arthur's Round Table. Edmund Spencer inspired to write Fairy Queen by the Thomas Aquinas, this philosopher. We already had discussed this thing, but as we just go forward and see some of his works, that is Amaruti was the Necrontis, and it has 88 sonnet sequence. Okay, sonnet sequence. I'm telling you. Then Colin Clouds come home again, which Spencer himself and home is Ireland. As he come back to his home, Spencer was deployed in Ireland for some time, and that's why he basically belonged to Ireland, and then he just shifted to the London. That's why Colin Cloud come home again. This is the poem written by him. The vision of this state of Ireland, that was only prose work by him. That is the Edmund Spencer. Then Definaida was Elizabeth for Douglas Howard, and his Astrophel was dedicated to Philip Sidney's wife, uh, Frances Walsingham. So actually, this Astrophel was another important by Edmund Spencer. It's a pastoral elegy uh, written by Edmund Spencer on the death of Sir Philip Sidney. Astrophel is lover, and he fell in love with the star called Stella. That is the story. We all have an idea. We had discussed it in our lecture also. So I don't go that much deep into it. Okay. Hope you just got these ideas. I would like to discuss, or let's say, I would like to introduce today's our chief guest of today's lecture, that is Sir Philip Sidney. We are going to discuss about him. We are going to talk about him and study about him, as it was considered as the ideal Renaissance man. We will go and try to study him in bit deep. We find that Sir Philip Sidney is the person who had uh, too much thing to do, and the one who has been called the epitome of mankind. These are the two um, adjectives we can say given to him. Ideal lover of Lady Penelope Devereux. Yeah, this is again a core love story. I'll tell you this in the course of time. Ideal lover of this Lady Penelope Devereux. Name is very important. Okay. And he was the person, even though he was a courtier who worked in court, along with it he was knighted. So that's why there was a battle of Jutfun took place, and he badly injured in uh, the battle, and he died. So that's why he was died in the battle of Jatpan. That was Jatpan. That is another thing. Okay. So let's move towards his works. As we just go and try to find out his work, he was the one who had written a poetry. Again, he was the one who had written a kind of literary criticism also, and his famous criticism we're going to discuss it. But yeah, first of all, we'll talk about his poetry. So, Astrophel and Stella, that was his first uh, poetry. I would like to tell you that is Astrophel and Stella is the first Elizabeth sonnet, and it consists of 108 sonnets and 11 love songs. Might have, yeah, see here. First Elizabeth sonnet sequence consists of 108 sonnets and songs, and it was dedicated to his wife. Uh, Again, as we just move forward, and we can see that is 27 plus sonnets actually have been taken from the Delia written by Philip Sidney's sister Mary Sidney and Samuel Daniel. We'll come to them also because Samuel Daniel was again one of the person who worked in this realm. Uh, that is this name Delia, Trilogy of the Poetry, written by Philip Sidney's sister Mary Sidney, and it was co-authored by Samuel Daniel. Okay, actually it was written in 1581, and it was published in 1613. So much later it was published. It's when you just go and see these things, Astafel and oh sorry, Astafel and Stella. Okay, that was published in 1591. See, written in 1580s, but published in 1590. Arcadia was uh, another anthology of poetry written by him. The Countess of Pembroke Arcadia. This was the full title. Arcadia. This is the full title of the, the poetry. Actually, this full title written to please his sister Mary because Mary had got this title, the Countess of Pembroke Arcadia. Uh, as we just move forward, it's a pastoral prose mm, and subtle comedy, we can call it. It's a pastoral prose romance and subtle comedy. Yeah, this was the thing. It was written in 81 and published in 1590. Okay. When we just go and try to study bit about the Arcadia, what we find Arcadia is nothing but the tradition of these older romances of chivalry was described this to this poetry. There is a story we can find between the lover and uh, mistress. Lover was the, who worked for the king. He went on the war, but uh, his love for his beloved was not kind of it was he was in the state that to be or not to be, what to do right now, and that situation of that particular lover has been dedicated, been described in the Arcadia, and we can find that how it was goes on, and finally one of his friend giving him an idea that whatever you are doing, it's a cowardness. You have to show your courage, your chivalry romance. So that's why he just changed, and he had fought rigorously in the his wartime. That is the whole story we can find in Arcadia. That's why it's called as, it's a pastoral prose romance and subtle comedy in the tradition of the older romances of chivalry. Okay, in front of you, and you can see it. Uh, yeah, then a defense of poesy. So, defense of poesy. Second name is the defense of poetry, and third name an apology for the poetry. These three are same word. Okay, but the names are the different. Why the names are different? Any guesses? Why the names are different? एकच वर्क आहे, बरोबर आहे, एकाच व्यक्तीने लिहिलंय, कंटेंट पण सेमच आहे, त्याचे नाव वेगवेगळे का असतील नाव वेगळे? हा, कारण का yeah, because of pub publisher मुळे वेगवेगळे नाव त्याला आले. ओके, विलियम पॉन्सन बाय वॉज दी वन publisher. Then Henry Horman was the other one. That's why these two editions over there, and we had the different names: a defense of poesy, the defense of poetry, and apology for poetry. It was published in 1895 first. Okay, and it was considered the first critical work. Okay, as you are going to study it in your literary criticism works, I'm not going to discuss it that much deep over here, but I'll give you the overall idea. It's a reply to Stephen Goson's School of Abuse. So, yeah, a story behind a defense of poesy, or I'll use this word, the defense of poetry. Okay, so Stephen Goson was a writer, and he says he has written a work called School of Abuse. Okay, uh, as we just go forward and see, Stephen goes on, has come up, he had come up with some allegations on the poetry. Okay, he says that poetry is not a kind of literary stuff. And what it do, it just gives an different what we can say, different aspects of human life. And it's make uh, willpower of the soldier. Yeah, I mean, he's just talking about that he just काय म्हणतो ना आपण त्याला, की ती सोल्जरची विल पॉवर कमकुवत करते, असं त्याचं म्हणणं होतं. ओके, कोणाचं? स्टीफन गोसॉनचं. And here we have Philip Sidney. He just come up with the answer on as a defense of poetry. And actually, first of all, it was written in pamphlet form in 58, uh, 38 pages. That is defense of poesy, and then it was published in a book form in 1595 as an apology for poetry. Okay, according to Philip Sidney, that this book talks about future, is not promise about future. This book is talk about the future, but it's not promise about the future. Okay, a bit uh, tricky one, but he says that poetry makes us strong, and he used this work as a rhetoric tool to describe his thought towards the poetry. Okay, and he also comment on this tragedy and comedy kind of stuff, and he says that they should not be mixed. Okay, or mongrel, that is the word he used in his own work. So as we just go forward, this is the stuff where we can find that is uh, this defense of poetry became one of the important dialogue uh, in this period. So, according, means I would like, I just want to devote or change the subject, but it is on the same outline. Okay, we know the Plato. Okay, so what Plato had done, yeah, Plato is come up with the thought process of Stephen Goson. Okay, um, Plato proposed that all poets should be banned from the ideal state. ओके, हे प्लेटोचं वाक्य होतं की आयडियल स्टेटमधून सगळे जे पोएट्स आहेत त्यांना बॅन केलं पाहिजे. सो why he just come up with such kind of philosophy? Because you said the same thing that Stephen goes on to talk about, that poetry is the mother of all lies. Okay, and it's just shaken the faith of the soldier, and they just give a romanticizing future. But um, as an ideal state, we need this strong soldier and his strong mental health, and for that purposes he uh, talked about the banishment of the poets from the ideal state. And he also proposed the one thing, that flute, okay, flute just the flute should be banned in a ideal state. Okay, आता डिफरंट व्ह्यूज असू शकतात प्रत्येकाचे. पोएट्री, तर पोएट्रीचे पण वेगवेगळे प्रकार आहेत, की रोमॅन्टिक पोएट्री और लेट्स से शिवलिक पोएट्री. डिपेंड की आता तुम्ही पोएट्री कसं घेता, की त्याची मिनिंग कशी असते. आता जसं आपण हिंदी पिक्चर्स मधली जी पोएट्री बघतो, पोएट्री म्हणजे फक्त कविता नाही, songs, they also considered as the part of the poetry. So त्यातलं जे काही फॉल इमिटेशन असतं ना, ते खूप वेगळं आहे, की लेट्स से की फॉर एक्झाम्पल की हाँ तेरे लिए दुनिया छोड़ दी है, तेरे लिए सांस आके रुके, हाँ मैं तुझे कितना चाहता हूँ की तुझे बता भी ना सके, असं काहीतरी एक गाणं आहे. बरोबर आहे. सो जस्ट इमॅजिन दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ fall imitation according to me. Here we can see that जर भाऊ तुझा श्वास रोखला गेला तर तू जिवंत राहशील काय? So in such cases, we can say that yeah, Plato and Stephen Gosans are the right. Okay, but on the other hand, when we just go forward and see the poetry of, let's take the example of Rabindranath Tagore or Robert Frost. Robert Frost would be the better. Robert Frost in his poetry says that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Okay, so here he just giving the state of his mind. Actually, its literal meaning is different, and actual meaning is different. He's just talking about his life. That is, if I'm just getting the all wealth and all kind of pleasurement right now, but I don't have to stop there. Okay, I have to do continuous kind of efforts in the same scenario, and that's why I have to work hard. So the the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Okay. Um, Maya Angelou, who was the one of the famous poet of the what we can say post-colonial poetry, and she talks about a phenomenal woman, very famous poem written by her. Just go and check out this poem. You find that how realistic poem is. Okay, or you can talk about the poetry of the Rabindranath Tagore, where we can find where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. My country still lets awake. Okay, so this is the different style of the poetry. So in this, I have told you the two different examples. Okay, that is Hindi songs was the stuff where you can find the false imitation of the poetry, but on the other hand you can find that it gives you a kind of uh, realistic touch of the poetry. So the same thing that Philip Sidney talks about over here, that is the poetry is a kind of tool which we can use according to our thought process. Okay, so poetry is not a thing which we can hate, but the thing where we can learn something from it. The same thing we can observe in this poetry. Okay, that's why these people are considered as the famous and what we can say super duper philosophers along with the poet and poetry. Okay, so see the Plato, आता आपण असं म्हणू शकत नाही की जो प्लेटो होता त्याला आपण वेगळ्या अँगलने बघू शकत होतो, बट एकाच गोष्टीकडे बघण्याचा अँगल कसा वेगळा वेगळा असू शकतो हे आपण ह्या दोन लोकांच्या एक्झाम्पल वरून घेऊ शकतो. की जसे की प्रत्येक गोष्टीच्या दोन बाजू असतात, म्हणून आता परत ॲज अ स्टुडंट ऑफ फिलॉसॉफी आय वुड लाईक टू टेल यू दिस थिंग अगेन दॅट की जे कुठलं डिसिजन आपण घेतो किंवा जे काही गोष्ट आपण करायला जातो तिथं ते म्हणताना की सर्वांगीण विचार करून निर्णय घेतला पाहिजे. सो आपण जर का एकच अँगल बघितला दुसरा अँगल नाही बघितला, सो व्हॉट विल हॅपन, वी विल डिस्ट्रॉय ourselves. So while taking the decision we must have to overall go with the overall thinking. Okay, म्हणजे सर्वांगीण विचार करून. आणि तसं मग परत आपले तुकाराम महाराज आहेतच. तुका सेज दॅट इज ऐकावे जनाचे करावे मनाचे. हा, आता परत यात वेगळंच नाही की तिथं आपलं असं की हा ठेविले अनंती तैसीचे राहावे चित्ते असू द्यावे समाधान, ही एक थिंग आहे. आणि दुसरी गोष्ट आहे की ऐकावे जनाचे करावे मनाचे. I'm just telling you the philosophical angles of the different things. But the same thing we can see over here, that is एकाच गोष्टीकडे बघण्याचा लोकांचा अँगल वेगवेगळा असू शकतो. ओके, व्हॉट वी हॅव टू गो विथ विथ आर इंटरप्रिटेशन. ओके, म्हणून कोण काय म्हणतं दॅट इज कॉल्ड ॲज अ क्रिटिसिझम. अँड आपण काय म्हणतो, आपण काय लिहितो, आपण कुठल्या माध्यमातून लिहितो, इट्स कॉल्ड ॲज अ creativity. Okay, so there's a potential difference between the criticism and the creativity. Okay, म्हणून when we just go and do study of this kind of literature, okay, तिथं, yeah, we have to take the example of the expert, what the expert says, their expertise, these are all the important things. But along with this thing, what is our interpretation? Okay, what is our point of view? That is the very important thing in the literature. And that's why the thing which I told you, that what we have to do, we have to go with the discussion. Okay, and that's why the discussion is very important aspect in the realm of the literature. Hope you just got my point. um yeah, before moving, I don't know whether I have put it over here or not. No. So apart from this one, I would like to tell you one thing. Okay, a defense of poetry. Hope you just got this point. Okay. There is a one group which we can call as a literary club of Elizabethan age. The name of the group is Areopagus. Okay, I come back to the Areopagus soon. But before that, I would like to discuss these three names. First one, George Gascoigne. Okay, Judge Gascoigne, 1525 to 1577. This is his time frame. He composed one of the first regular satire in the language. The name of the satire is The Still Glass, a satire compiled by the George Gascoigne Square. Okay, it was written in blank verse. He called himself a Chaucer's boy and Petrarch's journeyman. So you may ask me, sir, why we're talking about the George Gascoigne over here? Okay, because of his time frame, 1525 to 1577. And the second thing, this work, the steel glass. We have to question in net exam, probably in 2018 net. Okay, who is the author of the work called the steel glass? And he is no one other than the George Gascoigne. Okay. Mm, Then the next person we have is Michael Drayton, but I don't know whether we have to talk about him over here, or we can talk about him later also. Yeah, but just have a look on him. So Michael Drayton, his time frame 1563 to 1631. The Harmony of the Church was his one of the famous work. Verse paraphrase of the part of the Old Testament. Again, it was a kind of religious work where we can find some religious aspects which were described in this book. Okay, then Ideas Mirror, collection of the love sonnets. Okay, then he written this England's heroical epistles, written in 1597, collection of verse letters by lovers. Okay, yeah, but he earned the title of our English Ovid because he was the one who imitated Ovid's heroids. Okay, whatever he has written on the timeline of Ovid's heroids, and he just copied the heroid style. Even though his material was the original, but the style he has used, it's by Ovid's, and that's why he's called as an our English Ovid. I'm talking about the Michael Drayton. The next person I'm going to talk about, that is the Samuel Daniel, the one who has written a Delia uh, with this Philip Sidney's sister Mary Shelley. Uh, Again, he has written the work called A Complaint of Rosamond, which was written in 1592. One of the critical work. Uh, this was um, this was the work, The Complaint of Rosalind, is the overview of kind of the civil war fought between the two houses of Lancaster and York. So this was another book written by him, the civil war between the two houses of Lancaster and York. It's a kind of historical book, or we can call it as a kind of informative book. It talks about the War of Roses, that 30 years, and he just gives the account of the war, how harmful it was, and what was the output of that particular war. The best work sonnets, that is the Delia, we had discussed about it. He was the one who has written some masks. Okay. Mask. Any idea about the mask? Unlike poetry, masks are the short poetry which belong to this age. We'll talk about it when we discuss the different types of the poetry. Uh, so written mass, that is the Twin Wake, was the one written in 1610, and the Human's Triumph written in 1615. That was the second mask written by him. Mask, Masque, mask. Okay. Um, Again, he has written one critical work. The name of the work is Defense of Rhyme. Okay, listen. The name of the work is Defense of Rhyme. And what he says in Defense of Rhyme, that English poets need not be governed by the practice of the classics. Each literature entitles its own way. So again, he was the one who just advocate of the following your own path. Okay, with the change you want to see in. Unlike he says that you are the creator of your own destiny. So what he says, that need not be governed by the practices of the classic literature, huh? But according to him, each literature entitles its own way. प्रत्येक लिटरेचर हे त्याच्या पद्धतीने डेव्हलप होत असतं, हे त्याचं म्हणणं होतं. आणि ही जस्ट टॉक अबाउट इट इन लेट से लेट 15 लेट 16th century, सॉरी, हां, 16th century, 1590s मधलं त्याचं हे वाक्य आहे. अँड इट्स इवन टुडे we can find that this work, or this uh, comment, it, we can find that even today, um, we can find this is a true one, okay, to follow, because each literature entitles its own way. That is the one thing. So you may say how it is entitled its own way. So I would like to give you some examples. Okay, in today's era na, we can find which literature is trending. Okay. आजच्या डेटला कुठलं लिटरेचर ट्रेंडिंग आहे? व्हॉट डू यू थिंक? कुठलं लिटरेचर म्हणजे मी तुम्हाला पर्टिक्युलरली कंट्री वगैरे विचारत नाही, कुठल्या टाईपचं लिटरेचर जे आहे ते सध्या खूप फेमस आहे, किंवा त्याच्यामध्ये खूप गोष्टी लिहिल्या जातात. आणि आयडिया. Which literary trends getting followed in nowadays? Any idea? Okay, the period which we are suffering through right now, it's called as the post-pandemic literature. Okay, so as we just see and try to find out, uh, each and every literature has its own way to describe. Okay, and the same thing we can find. uh, ठीक आहे, तुम्हाला एक एक्झाम्पल दिल्यावर बरोबर कळेल की the English poet need not to be governed by the practice of the classic. Each literature entitled its own way. सो हे कसं, तर लेट्स आहे की जसं वेगवेगळे एराज आपण बघतो, तो प्रत्येक एरामध्ये वेगवेगळे लिटरेचर चे प्रकार झालेत. ओके, पण त्याच्यावर त्या पर्टिक्युलर गोष्टींचा काहीतरी परिणाम झाला त्या पिरियड मधल्या. लाईक वेन यू टॉक अबाउट रोमॅन्टिक लिटरेचर, वी कॅन फाइंड इट वॉज बेस्ड और इट वॉज इम्पॅक्टेड by the French Revolution. Okay, then when we just move and see the war literature, okay, which was become famous after the First World War literature. Then post-colonial literature, we know that is when the English colonies or French colonies left their places, the literature emerged through these type these places. It's called as an post-colonial literature. So it was, it's entitled its own way. That is the thing I would like to tell you. That is even today it is uh, what we can call it. It's very relatable. एक्झाम्पल्स मी तुम्हाला दिलेत. असे बरेच गोष्टी आहेत की आफ्टर द सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर देर वॉज टू मच पेसिमिझम. पेसिमिस्टिक लिटरेचर लिहिलं गेलं. पेसिमिझम सगळीकडे खूप पसरला होता. एक्झिस्टेन्शियलिझम जे म्हणतो आपण ना, त्या गोष्टी खूप मॅटर करायला लागल्या होत्या की हा सगळं क्षणभंगूर आहे, कधी काय होऊ शकतं. कारण लोकांची फेथ हा जो प्रकारे तो उडून गेला होता. आणि इतके डिवॉस्टिंग आफ्टर दी हिरोशिमा नागासाकी, these atom bombs were getting used, and the people have seen that we can say a black side of human nature has played a very drastic, it has made a drastic change, drastic, what we can call it, impact on the people, their thought process, and their living style also. खूप लिटरेचर वाचायचं तुम्हाला, तिथून कळतं. वॉल्डन जे लिहिलं गेलं, दॅट वॉज दी वन थिंग. बघा आता वॉल्डन काय, थोरो कोण होतं बघा. गो थ्रू द इंग्लिश, अमेरिकन लिटरेचर मधले लोक होते. सिव्हिल डिसोबडियन्स, वाचाल तर वाचाल. So this is the thing I would like to tell you. So apart from this, there were no any other poets who belongs to this age, and those who are those who have written the poetry, they also have written some dramas, and their dramas became very powerful. So we can't describe them right now over here as a poet. And the best example of it, it's William Shakespeare. Okay, William Shakespeare, he also have written